Have you seen videos like these and are wondering how to build your very own zoo in Minecraft? Well, you're in luck, because in this video, I'm going to show you how to make amazing zoo habitats. And stick around until the end of the video where I'll walk you through building a habitat step by step. There, you can follow along and copy my process. I've already built Minecraft in Planet Zoo, so I thought it would be appropriate to do the opposite by bringing Planet Zoo into Minecraft. Here are the best tips on how to build an awesome zoo enclosure. Number 1. Build the viewing area first, then the habitat. Making the viewing area first is absolutely critical. If you don't keep how you're actually supposed to see your animals in your zoo, the habitat scale can be really off. And then you're stuck trying to fit the viewing area in at the last minute, and that wouldn't go so well. In general, just laying out a simple semicircle is usually enough to determine your scale, and get started on the build. If you're building multiple viewing areas, lay out those in advance as well. My second tip is to make your habitat in an interesting shape. Sure, you could make it just a rectangle, square, or circle, but that's probably going to be a little bit boring. Even if you want the build to be symmetrical, try rounding off your corners or making some pop-outs. This should be relatively easy to achieve, especially since we started by making the viewing area first. Number 3. Make sure you decide on an area for shelter and/or backstage. Now, not everyone does this step, but I believe that it is absolutely crucial, even if you're not trying to make a realistic enclosure. Giving your animals a shelter is another way to watch them interact with their environment. It allows you an opportunity to make another focal point for your build. The shelter is usually where I make the entrance point of my habitats, as it's easy to keep hidden from the main view. Don't forget to make a double entrance point for your more nimble critters. Alternatively, you can make an awesome sleeping area viewpoint as well. My fourth tip is to not go too big. There's no animal welfare in Minecraft, so you don't have to make a massive and expansive habitat when the build doesn't call for it. Small habitats are easier to fill in and to see the animals. Larger habitats work if you're making a safari style zoo, but usually that would require some animal mods, and that's a topic for a whole other video. Create a slope towards the back of the habitat. This creates a stage-like effect and makes it much easier to see your animals. Plus, not having a flat habitat is much more interesting to look at. Remember, don't make your slope consistent. Draw out the shape of your slope first with lots of irregularities to create interest. My next tip is to look at real-life references. Referencing other creators' builds can be a good idea, but going straight to the source is even better. You can simply look up a few zoos close to you, or a zoo that you really like. Use Google to make note of their architectural features, theming, layout, etc. You don't necessarily have to try and build a zoo one for one. Just cherry pick the elements that you feel most inspired by. It's usually best if your viewing area is higher than your habitat. Remember when I said to lay out your viewing area first? Well, take a look at this open air viewing that is level with the habitat. Now, watch what happens when I raise it up just one block. You instantly get a better view of the entire habitat. However, this trick won't necessarily apply everywhere. I find that it works best for open air habitats, but if you want a tunnel or close-up of the animal, just use glass viewing instead. Use double barriers. One thing that is very common in real-life zoos is the use of double barriers. Double barriers are there to further prevent guests from harming or being harmed by the animals. Add these to your zoo if your barrier is looking rather bland. See how a simple fence in front of this glass looks very realistic. Make sure to use thin blocks that don't connect to each other. Decorate outside of the habitat. No habitat is complete without a little bit of theming. You don't have to go all Disney on it, but even adding some simple shrubs or an informational sign or banner can really step up the build. With all of these tips out of the way, it's time to show you my process on building a habitat. The animal that we're going to be building for today is the fox. Using an animal with a broad range of habitats is great because there's lots of room for creativity, making it an easy one to start out with. This is the general palette I'm going to be using today. I may not use all of the blocks, but it's a good idea to have some sort of vision going in. So here we have just the basic layout of the enclosure. I just went for symmetrical bean shape, and on the right hand side here we have a pop out where the shelter is going to be. So as I mentioned in the tutorial, we're going to start by building the viewing area. I'm making it raised up just a slab in order to get a little bit of a better viewing. Now we're going to go around and just do the basic layout of the wall. So I think something like that is perfectly acceptable. It's not looking the best at the moment, but it's good to have this just to get an idea of what the surroundings will look like. Now we're going to make the shelter. I think I want to make this look kind of like a den. So we're gonna make it super cozy with lots of stone and wood and things like that. Essentially what I'm doing here is filling in the roof with slabs. I'm just making them go up half a block at each interval. I did go ahead and change up the design just a little bit. All I did was widen the overhang area in the front here, so that way it would be even on the top. With the gap I have left, I'm going to add another layer of cobblestone. This is a little bit of just like faux theming to imply that we have like a skylight or a second story. For the final layer, I'm actually going to be using stairs because I want it to be a little bit pointier. Something else we're going to do is start replacing some of the plain cobblestone I used as a filler with some mossy cobblestone and other materials. So I think that just gives it a little bit of depth. Foxes are pretty quick animals, so we're actually going to make a little bit of an airlock so that way you can enter, close the door behind you, and then open it up again so that way the foxes can't get outside. This one I just made using fences, just so that way when you're in the airlock here, you can see where the foxes are. It's still pretty dark in here, so we're gonna add a little bit of a window. I'm using the black stained glass just to make it appear like it's one-way glass essentially. And once again, we're just gonna be replacing some of the blocks with the various ones in our palette. Overall, it's looking pretty decent in here, so we're just gonna go ahead and give it a stone flooring. A lot of the times in real life zoos, the flooring is concrete because it is easily washed. However, concrete is not very cozy, and so to give the foxes a nice comfy place to sleep, we're going to be using hay scattered around. And then what we're also going to do is give the foxes a nice cozy bed. I think it would be cute to have them sleeping by the window here, and then we're just going to enclose this all with trapdoors. There, now they have a big fluffy bed that they can sleep on. The last thing we need to do is make it so the shelter can be fully enclosed so the foxes can stay in during the nighttime. I'm also going to add some more windows up here. One window on either side should be enough. Like I mentioned, one of my tips was to give the habitat a slope, so we're going to draw out the shape of that right now. I think that looks pretty good, so we'll go ahead and fill it in. I think in some areas I want it to actually be a little bit higher as well. Just around the very back. I'm thinking this looks great. However, if you notice, the wall is probably not high enough over here, so we're going to go ahead and fix that. I think I want to use the wall to act like a backdrop in this situation and give it a mountainous shape. So we're going to add some natural looking peaks. I think that looks a lot better, but it's pretty monotonous texture wise, so we're going to go ahead and change up some of the blocks to make it look like the mountain texture changes as it goes up. I think that's looking a little better, but it's still pretty gray, so let's add in the spruce like we did on either side of the shelter here. I'm really happy with how the terrain in this habitat is turning out, so I think we need to lay out some larger elements like trees. I want to do some pretty tall spruce trees in the back, and one trick that you should use is by stacking grass blocks like this. You can do just one or two high. In this case, I want to do two because I want this tree to be super tall, and then placing your sapling on top of it. And then when the tree is grown, you can erase the dirt blocks and replace it with logs. So it gives the tree some height without you having to build a custom tree. So I have two nice tall trees like this. I think I want to add one more. This one, however, I think I want to be an oak tree. Now that the walls are high enough, I'm actually going to release this fox from its cage. It seems he's found himself a cozy spot underneath the oak tree. If we look at the other habitats, you can see that I've added a variety of textures on the ground. So we're going to repeat that here. One tip I have is to create a path leading up to the shelter and where the animals would most likely walk around. And then once I like the layout, that's where I can add in the different kinds of blocks. In this case, I'm just using rooted dirt and coarse dirt interchangeably, and they're gonna act as the main path where the grass can't grow anymore. Then podzol can look like mud or other types of dirt that you can blend in clumps. I like to do this about under where the trees go because it looks like there's not enough light for the grass to grow under them. I think that's looking pretty good, so now we need to add some moss. I'm just going to keep it simple by using the moss carpet tool. In other habitats, sometimes I will place actual blocks of moss down, but I find that the carpet helps me use it a little bit more sparingly. Next up, we need to add some bushes. We're just going to be using the oak leaves for this, just so we can keep the palette limited. Something that's important with the bushes is don't make them so high that the fox can just jump right out of the habitat. I've made that mistake before, and you don't want to have to do what I do, you know, running around like a maniac trying to catch your escaped animal. You can also take out sections of the ground too. Do this sparingly though. And don't forget to take a step back to make sure you're not going absolutely overboard with your decorating. Now comes the easiest part. Just take bone meal and scatter it around on different parts of your habitat to let the grass and flowers grow. If you don't like something, just break the block and replace it with something that you do like. I'm going to be removing all of the dandelions here because I want to go with a different palette for this habitat. One of my favorite flowers in the game are the peonies, so I really want to be able to use them in this habitat here. When you're placing flowers like this, instead of placing them randomly and scattered about, place them in clusters. It'll make it look like it's growing way more naturally. I'm also going to be placing these little red crimson fungus things. I'm using these instead of the normal red mushrooms just because I like how big and chunky they are. And then finally, for your ground cover, I'm going to use the Azure Bluette. I think this looks really good in the foreground, like we're standing at the edge of a meadow looking into the forest. Lastly, we're going to add some ferns into the mix, especially around the spruce trees. If there's any bald patches, you can fill those in with grass as well. I think that this habitat is looking really cute, so I would definitely say we're done there. I already have a path laid out in this zoo here, so don't forget to add your own. But one thing you can do to spice up the outside a little bit is add a lectern. This is going to look like it's an informational sign that you can come up and read about the foxes. If you don't like the lectern though, feel free to make your own custom information signs. This is really easily achieved by just blocking out some area in your wall and adding signs. You can also add other little decorations around the signs to make them eye-catching. But there you have it. That's your tutorial on how to make a little fox habitat. Feel free to copy everything I do in your own Minecraft world. I hope you guys were able to learn something from this tutorial, and if you enjoyed watching, don't forget to leave a like and tell me what you thought about this down in the comments below, especially if you have any additional useful tips on how to build a zoo in Minecraft. If you'd like to see more content like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.